No matter what kind of roads you take, this journey will lead you to the crossroad of mesmerizing, calming, delicious, and very precious, pure, daring, loud, healing, enchanting, yes, this is it. This is life. And we wait for you to live it this summer in Georgia. Georgia, at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, welcomes the world for investment, travel, trade and transit. Georgia, aspiring economic center of the Caucasus and important link in the new Silk Road. And one of the easiest and safest countries in the world in which to do business. Georgia, one of the world's key transport and energy hubs. Georgia, with an array of free trade agreements, opens access to 2.3 billion market without customs duty. Georgia, making business easy. Roads you take, this journey will lead you to the crossroad of mesmerizing, calming, delicious, and very precious, pure, daring, loud, healing, enchanting, and proud. Yes, this is it. This is life. And we wait for you to live it this summer in Georgia. Georgia, at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, welcomes the world for investment, travel, trade and transit. Georgia, aspiring economic center of the Caucasus and important link in the new Silk Road. And one of the easiest and safest countries in the world in which to do business. Georgia, one of the world's key transport and energy hubs. Georgia, with an array of free trade agreements, opens access to 2.3 billion market without customs duty. Georgia, making business easy.
Dear delegates, the next session is about to start. Please be seated. Dear delegates, the next session is about to start. Please be seated.
Georgia, at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, welcomes the world for investment, travel, trade and transit. Georgia, aspiring economic center of the Caucasus and important link in the new Silk Road. And one of the easiest and safest countries in the world in which to do business. Georgia, one of the world's key transport and energy hubs. Georgia, with an array of free trade agreements, opens access to 2.3 billion market without customs duty. Georgia, making business easy. No matter what kind of roads you take, this journey will lead you to the crossroad of mesmerizing, calming, delicious, and very precious, pure, daring, loud, healing, enchanting, and proud. Yes, this is it. This is life. And we wait for you to live it this summer in Georgia.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very, very warm welcome to all of you. We're absolutely delighted that you've joined us here for this particular panel, where we're going to really take an in-depth look at the energy landscape here in Georgia and indeed in the region, and the importance of Georgia as the transit country very much in a way. When we look back on reflect on what we heard this morning, we heard lots of great news and lots of great plans about all the projects that are in place, the tremendous investment that's in place, the economic development that is to come. And I can tell you, you are at the most important panel of the entire forum, because if these gentlemen here are not with their hands on the buzzer, and if we're not looking after the energy matters here in this country, there will be no development, there will be no industry. And when we look at the energy infrastructure, it is without a doubt the most important sector that we look at. That is what fuels industry, that is what fuels entertainment, education, whatever it is. If we turn the lights off, we're all in trouble. So I'm very excited to be doing this panel for you. My name is Etna Trainer. I'm going to be your moderator. I'm on my way to the OPEC meeting tomorrow, so it'll be a very busy time there when all of the ministers from indeed 24 countries that have taken their time as well to really look at the energy sector in the world and see what's going on here, because I think all eyes are on, where energy is going to lead us to the future. So let's move on this. We're looking at the Transregional Opportunities. Let me quickly introduce our panel to you. We have lots to hear from them. They have a lot of very, very important information that we'd like to share with you. The Deputy Minister of Energy of Georgia is joining me here, Mr. Grigory Chikovani. Wonderful to see you, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time. Also joining us too from the Georgian Gas and Oil Corporation, the Director General, Mr. David Twalebeshvili. Lovely to see you here. Thank you so much. The Regional President of BP is also with us. Gary Jones is here. From the Clean Energy Group in Georgia, the CEO, Mr. Bjorn Branzek, is here also. Thank you for joining us. And from the EBRD, the European Bank, of course, for Reconstruction and Development, the Director for the Caucasus, Moldova, and Belarus. We're delighted to be joined by Bruno Balvanera. So this is our panel. A quite diverse panel. We're really going to be looking at what's going on in conventional energy, in the gas world, in renewable energy, hydro energy. We have the lot covered. But just to give us a perspective and really bring us up to date with what the energy landscape looks like here, Gorgi, I'm going to break it up with you, and if you can just put it in perspective in terms of what is going on at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Etna. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take opportunity and thank you, all of you, for participating in this important meeting. Throughout its history, Georgia has been a link between two civilizations, between East and West. And today, Georgia aims to strengthen this position as a transit country, but transit not only for transportation, logistics, communications, but for energy as well. Etna, you are right. Without energy, of course, it is impossible to imagine any kind of development in economy. For decades, Georgia has proven itself as a reliable transit country. We host a number of international transit projects like Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan, South Caucasian gas pipeline, Western Route export pipeline, which serve to deliver Caspian natural resources, energy resources to the West. In this context, government of Georgia welcomes the progress in development of Trans-Adriatic and Trans-Anatolian pipeline projects, and we support in implementation of South Caucasus pipeline expansion project. These projects will deliver more volumes to EU countries, will strengthen energy security of EU, and support the diversification of energy sources and routes, which is so important for the EU countries. Those projects are a good precondition for other international projects and potential for expansion even further for the southern gas corridor, and including in the corridor the natural gas from Turkmenistan. And I would like to underline the importance of Trans-Caspian pipeline project and White Stream project, which in particular will reach Central European countries and Eastern European countries. So with these projects are important not only for Georgia, they are important for region, and they play a crucial role in connecting East to the West. I would like to just briefly describe the situation in our energy sector of Georgia. As you are aware, we have joined the energy community, so we are full-fledged member of energy community, which is an important milestone for Georgian energy sector. We are starting a new wave of reforms, which is not new for Georgia. We've been reforming our sector since the 90s, and we are one of the leaders in the region in energy reforms. So we are very optimistic that those reforms will support even further investments in renewable energy, investments in infrastructure. These reforms will even make our market more transparent, and will support integration of regional markets, which will only serve to bring welfare for our citizens as well as for the investors. Georgia is rich with hydropower resources, and my colleagues will be speaking more about this. So I would like to send a message to investors that yes, we are still promoting investments in hydropower sector. Our objective is to fully utilize and effectively utilize our resources. We are welcoming and inviting more investors. We are inviting traders, energy traders, banks, to work with us to invest in Georgia and invest for the future of the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And indeed, as you say there, Georgia, open for business.
Absolutely.
So, and to convince you that this is definitely good business here, we're now going to hear from David, the Director General for the Georgian Gas and Oil Corporation. And if you bring us up to speed too in terms of what's going on, particularly, again, using Georgia as its very, very important and strategic role as a transit country.
Thank you, Etna. Yes, of course. I will try now to elaborate a little bit more on what the Deputy Minister mentioned in his presentation, his speech. This is the role of Georgia's role as a transit country. This is a key role, and since regaining our independence, we've been trying to develop this function of our country. So everything started in 1996. In 1995, when we signed the agreement with International Consortium, AIOC, operating in Azerbaijan and led by BP, and we started implementation of the Baku-Supsa pipeline. I see some people here in this room. Gia Gwaladze, Mike Haugil is also there. Michael, yes. So we started this development, and I think, and I believe we have achieved a lot, because through cooperation with our partner countries, neighboring countries, and the oil companies, we have built 3 major oil and gas pipeline projects: BTC pipeline, Baku-Supsa pipeline, the South Caucasus pipeline. So these are huge infrastructure projects and strategically important for the country projects. There were a lot of questions at that time asked about Georgia, whether Georgia could implement this size of projects, but we have proved that we can do it in line with internationally recognized technical standards, and we have, together with our partner countries, created a special legal regime for the development of these projects, of these pipeline projects, and now we are where we are. But of course, Georgia, I believe, and everybody in this country believes that Georgia has a bigger transit potential, of course, and in this regard, we have to consider and look at Turkmenistan. As the Deputy Minister rightly mentioned, they have huge reserves of especially natural gas, and at the same time, the European Union is seeking for independent source, a new independent source for natural gas to supply a European market. So there is an opportunity, of course, to deliver volumes of gas from Turkmenistan to Europe through Azerbaijan, Georgia, and there are ideas, different ideas, of course. Among others, this Turkmen gas can be delivered to Europe through the South Caucasus pipeline, TAP, and there is a construction ongoing, and I'm sure we will discuss it today later. And there is another possibility also to build a new pipeline through the Black Sea and via Romania to enter the Eastern European market. So
with the start of the ACG field, we then, from there, we initially transported the oil from Baku to Supsa in the Black Sea, and then we built the BTC, which is the Baku to TBILISI Ceyhan pipeline. As you can see, goes all the way to the Mediterranean, and that started to really open up the Caspian as an international prospect for oil and gas. We then brought in the Shah Deniz field, which is again a massive gas field of global scale, and built the SCP pipeline, which is South Caucasus pipeline, and that then started getting gas delivered into Georgia and Turkey. And just to give you an idea of the scale in that development over the last 2 decades, we've built 9 offshore platforms now. There's 3 huge processing terminals, obviously Shangshel in Baku, and then we have our terminal on the Black Sea in Supsa, and Ceyhan in the Mediterranean. And we've also developed subsea. The Caspian is now capable of building jackets, topsides, world-class subsea construction vessels, and we've upgraded the yards. So it's been a huge development of both Azerbaijan and Georgia's and Turkey's infrastructure. To give you an idea of the scale, we've now produced about 3.2 billion barrels of oil from the Caspian, about 85 billion cubic meters of gas, and about 170 million barrels of condensate has flowed through these different pipelines. And that's meant a lot of jobs, so about 24,000 jobs at the moment. At the peak of the next phase, which is Shah Deniz phase 2, about 6,000 jobs in Georgia, and probably about double that along the rest of the Southern Corridor pipeline, which I'll talk to in a second. So that's the history of it. I think looking forward, the good news is we've had 25 years of, I think, quite stunning development. I think the good news is there's a lot more to come. We are just now in the final stages of phase 2 of Shah Deniz, which is 2 platforms offshore, the first subsea production in the Caspian, all built locally. And that connects into an extension of SCP, which is being done in Georgia, which is now 100% mechanically complete. It's about 90% commissioned. And we'll start flowing the first gas into Turkey from that phase 2 in the summer of next year. That then connects into a pipeline called TANAP, which, as you can see, goes right across Turkey. And that connects into TAP, which then goes across Albania and Greece and into Italy, into the southern tip of Italy. And that gas will start flowing around 2020. And that's basically connecting the Caspian to southern Europe, a 3,500 kilometer pipeline. And it's probably the biggest project globally now, non-military project in the world. Fascinating project from offshore in the Caspian all the way through to the southern tip of Italy. And beyond that, we, on September the 14th, we signed the extension of what was the contract of the century on ACG, and it's been named already the contract of the new century, which extends that contract out to 2050. Shah Deniz has also been extended out until that's the middle of this next century. So that creates the opportunity for about another $40 billion of investment. And you think we've already, together with our co-partners, already invested about $65 billion in what's been built to date. So massive investment opportunities. And really has created the capability now for the Caspian to become one of the huge basins of the world, similar to the North Sea in previous decades and the Gulf of Mexico. The Caspian really is where it is at right now in terms of the complexity of the technologies that we're using. And the people working in these projects will become world-class in their field. I think it's a very exciting time for the region, very exciting time for the people in Georgia. So I think that gives you a bit of context.
Thank you so much, Gary. And when you look at this map, actually, for anybody who's not familiar with the scale of the country, and it's incredibly impressive. So looking at this and looking at the work that's going on here and seeing actually the huge valuable contribution that the country is making, I think it's very, very obvious and very clear. So I think it's keep up the good work, we say to BP, and keep that investment flowing. There's a lot of countries depending on you. Now, of course, oil and gas is a huge story in the region, but hydroelectricity and hydropower is not something new to the region. Indeed, it's got a lovely history. So, Bjorn, I'd like to bring you in here in your role as the CEO of Clean Energy Group in Georgia and bring us up to date in terms of what is going on. And I do have a little gift for you here. Yes. So we'll make sure that you can highlight some of the great work you're doing, and really when we look at the potential for hydro in the region as well.
Thank you so much. So I've called my very, very short presentation, Georgia, potential hydropower in the region. And the reason for that is basically the following. If you look at how most of the European energy systems have been developed, most countries fortunate enough to have hydro power resources, they tend to develop as much as they can of this resource. And the reason for it is, of course, that it tends to be cheap. It's a flexible resource, which becomes more and more important now with, let's say, more renewable phasing into the energy system. And in addition to that, it's a domestic resource. So it's a resource that the countries can control themselves, which is important for any country that wants to have control to some extent, at least over their own energy system. I come from Norway, and Norway has, like Georgia, a very, very substantial hydro resource. We have around 130 TWh of energy production. All of it is hydro. It's a 100% renewable system, which is fully flexible and still delivers the cheapest electricity in Europe. And that is a hydro system in the medium and long run. That's as I said, 100% renewable, it's flexible, and it's very, very cheap. And Georgia is now, basically with the resource base that is here, Georgia has the opportunity to follow the path of other great or big hydro nations, and also build or continue developing their hydro resource or their energy system around their hydro resources. And that's what I want to speak a little bit about today. Hydro projects, a bit like oil and gas projects, are very difficult to build. I mean, you can look at a river and you think, okay, fine, this is going to be relatively straightforward. The reality is that the complexity of building, let's say, tunnels, dealing with social issues, dealing with a lot of environmental issues, and you have a very strong environmental lobby here in Georgia, makes these projects among the most complex projects to deliver. Apart from offshore oil and gas, the next in the pecking order in terms of getting the project delivered, I think, is major hydro. So it's a project that requires strong expertise from the sponsors in terms of actually getting things delivered. And it also requires basically a huge amount of upfront investment. And unlike oil and gas, where you basically are tapping into very often a very profitable resource, hydro is also quite marginal. I mean, it's very much so that you have to have the really long picture glasses on in order to justify an investment into hydro. Because it's really, the first 10 years after you complete it, it's a struggle just to pay back your loans and your interest. And just after that, basically it's worth the investment of putting money into these projects. We have developed a couple of big projects here in Georgia already. We are about to complete this Shuakevi project, which is almost 200 megawatts, and which is the first cross-border financing, project financing done, among others, with the EBRD, Georgia, Turkey. 38 kilometers of tunnel, I think the second longest tunnel project in the world in the hydro space. And generally a lot of complexities. We're now developing a new very large project here called this Namakhwani project that many of you have heard of. It's been around for 80 years, and now we finally think basically next year it will be financed and we can build it. It will be around 3,000 people working on the project when it's executed, so it's another major employer in Georgia during the construction of the project. So we have a bit of track record, and the reason why we have invested is because we believe in Georgia. We believe in basically already 10 years back, we were saying this is the place to be in terms of emerging market renewable energy. And we started basically 7 years back with the Shuakevi project, and we are, when we look at all the people, all the interest now, we think that we basically made the right bet. I would like to say a few things also, and especially since we have the government here, about some of the challenges that the hydropower developers are facing. Because we heard a lot about integration of markets this morning and the benefit of basically electricity flowing between countries. And Georgia, as many other countries, they have a very hydrology which is very loop-sided. So you tend to have a lot of water coming in the spring and the summer, and already there is a surplus of water in the, and electricity in the country. And then there is a deficit in the winter, or very little flow, which means basically that you have to build your power systems in two ways. Either you build huge dams to store the water, which frankly is very difficult to develop in these kind of, let's say, modern environmental times with modern compliance requirements. Or at least it requires a lot of work to get these approved. Or you are trying to build so much of your resource that you will also be able to cover basically your full winter supply through the existing flow with relatively smaller dams. But then you need to have a market to export in the spring and the summer. And that is kind of the model that we very much think that the government or the Georgia should go down in terms of continue developing their hydro resources, meet in the medium run all of their electricity demand through renewable energy, and basically open up to the neighboring countries in terms of export of electricity. And particularly, of course, Turkey, which is a gas-based electricity system, relatively high electricity prices, huge demand, and it will continue with very significant demand growth and high prices also in the future. And for that to work, Deputy Minister, there needs to be small tariffs on interchange of electricity between the countries. And at the moment, we as developers, we think the tariff is far too high. We pay almost 50% of the income in Turkey. We pay in transmission costs just to exchange the electricity from Turkey or from Georgia to Turkey. So that is an important thing that needs to be looked at. And also there needs to be sufficient capacity to be able to actually transit. It's very important for further investments in the hydro field here that more capacity is developed both on the Turkish side and the Georgian side so that it's actually the interchange of electricity is working. At the moment, we don't unfortunately have the luxury of building a 3,000 megawatt or a kilometer pipeline. We have to rely on public infrastructure, and the public infrastructure is not yet in place to be able to have effective interchange of electricity, especially not on the Turkish side. And here is a call to EBRD as well, of course, which is financing these transmission lines and the back-to-back station, that the lower the interest rates can be put on this infrastructure so that we actually can get down the cost, the better it is for our renewable electricity future in Georgia. So that's basically what I would like to say.
Well, thank you so much for that, Bjorn, and well done for taking an opportunity to put an appeal out there and let them know exactly what you want. Huh? Yeah, I'm sure they've heard this before, but it's reinforcing this and, again, looking at the advantages that can be brought by hydro. Now, Bruno, when we look at the tremendous work that EBRD is doing, and we heard from the boss this morning talking a little bit about some of the development and some of the investment that is in place, particularly in the renewable space. And we look around the world and we look at, you know, European legislation as well, and really the big push towards renewable and the absolute essential push towards renewable as we're really in a sort of transitionary position, not just on Georgia is a transit country, but when we look at the world in terms of transition from one energy source to the other. So tell us a little bit, give us the background on some of the projects that you have in place and how they're working.
Thank you, Edna. Let me probably start by saying how important for DBRD is to have renewable energy. Some of you may know, a few years ago, we started with our energy efficiency activities, and as we got into there, we got more and more deep. And today, EBRD is one of the leaders in terms of sustainable development, energy efficiency, and green development. I need to say that DBRD is the first international financial institution that has set internally an objective. And our objective is today that at least 25% of our yearly investments are towards better ways of consuming energy, producing energy, and renewables. We have a target of 25%. This year we are going to exceed it and we are going to arrive to 43%. And in 2020, our own target is going to be 40%. And in addition to that, let me say that out of the activity of all the IFIs in the world, EBRD counts for 25% of the energy and renewables of what we do, all the IFIs. Now, let me show you a graph of what we have been doing, not only in Georgia, but in the broader region. You can see here, this is a map of the area of the world that we work. We have put here what we do in different sources of renewable, starting with hydro, extremely important, of course, for Georgia, but not all the countries have the wealth of mountains as Georgia, and in this case also a few other countries have, like Bulgaria, but very much into wind, very much into solar, and in the specific case of Turkey, also into geothermal. And we have also been involved in a couple of countries in biomass, which has been a topic that has brought a number of controversies, but I think we are finding a way to develop it. If you look at this map, you can see that out of our countries, we work in 36 countries, in more than 1/3, we are participating in generation of renewable energy. And you can see how much we have been dedicating to the three main areas, which are wind, solar, and hydro. And you can see in which countries. Country number 1 is Poland, country number 2 is Romania, and country number 3 is Georgia. Now, when you focus into Georgia and you see that we have created 394 megawatts of hydro, that includes some of the projects that we have discussed with clean energy, Arja-Ascali. That includes also Nguri, which is a state-owned. That includes Paravani, but does not include our huge number of projects in which we're working currently and looking forward to close, in particular Nenskra. Nenskra is going to be the largest hydro construction in the region in a very long time. We are talking about $1 billion investment. We are talking about a huge new capacity to come into place. And as Bjorn said, quite a number of issues from the environmental and recyclable angle. But I need to say that out of the IFIs, probably DBRD is the institution that feels the more comfortable with these issues. We have dealt with them for a long time. We have a very professional team that has engaged. We listen to the civil society. We address their issues. And we have a very tough environmental internal policy. So all in all, in this region, you can see that we have financed almost 4,500 megawatts or million megawatts renewable of new capacity that in total is close to 8 billion euros over time. This is about over time we were created 10 years ago. This is about 10% of what we have done, but with a very strong emphasis over the last few years. And the more we advance, the more we are going to go into this. My second slide to show you is that we also strongly believe that the big corridors, we've been working with BP, partnering with BP for years, and we have been working in the region. We worked many years ago in the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. This was a few years after I joined the bank, so you can imagine that I've been in the bank many, many, many years because this pipeline has been there for many years. I remember at the time there were so many groups saying that the pipeline was going to contaminate Borjomi, that you were going to create an environmental damage, and all these fears that fortunately never realized. But it's not a question of luck. It's a question of planning, and it's a question of professionalism. You may know that very recently, about a month ago, DBRD signed the largest ever single project financing in 25 years. This is a $500 million contribution to TANAP. This is an extremely big contribution from DBRD to help to bring the gas coming all the way from the Shah Deniz, from the Caspian Sea, through Azerbaijan, through Georgia, Turkey, and then the Balkans all the way to Italy. And this is just one part of what we're going to do. Next year, we are going to participate in the financing of the last end of it in the Balkans, and it's going to be the largest ever syndicated transaction in EBRD. As Gary from the BP said, this is the largest project in history today, and we are very proud to be participating with the highest standards in terms of governance, in terms of transparency, in terms of environmental and resettlement. The last slide I would like to show, because the forum is an integration forum. We're talking about the Belt and Road. And I could not miss to talk to you about also a very important project that we have financed in Central Asia, which is the electricity connection in summertime, very important to help to bring electricity from Afghanistan to Central Asia, going through Tajikistan, and moving to Kyrgyzstan. Clearly, the EBRD is very committed. We understand the importance of energy, energy generation, energy security, energy independence, clean energy, energy efficiency. All are very important topics very close to our heart. And of course, we are a bank. We need to charge interest. We try to do our best. I think the name of the game for everybody is to bring the costs down. This is the cost of the technology, and we have seen how much the technology in solar panels has advanced, how much they have lowered the costs, how much new opportunities are coming from this R&D development, and of course, all the elements that constitute part of the cost of generation electricity, including the cost of the transmission lines, the cost of the funds. All this is going to be important to bring cheap, efficient, and reliable electricity. You started saying, without electricity, without energy, the world will stop. And it is our commitment and our responsibility to make sure to bring it to the households. Thank you.
Super, thank you so much. And I can, again, for all of our speakers, thank you so much. But Bruno, I was in Tajikistan and the Kyrgyz Republic in the summer, and I can tell you they'll be rolling out the red carpet for you to please, please, please get the lights on before 6 o'clock at night. So, I mean, tremendous opportunities there. I listened to all of you, the great work that has been done and the tremendous work that has been done with such speed. And I think, you know, well done to the government. We heard too this morning, you know, about the government support that is in place. But Georgi, you're now part of the energy community. And this, I believe, very, very vital for the country as well. But how important is it for the country, and how will it actually impact Georgia and the regional energy markets? Is it essential that you're part of this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As I mentioned, Georgia has gone tremendous way in reforming its energy market, and we had many challenges on our way. We had huge energy security challenges in the end of 90s and beginning of 2000, and we implemented aggressive reforms, and we managed to overcome the challenges. Now we face different challenge, and this is to create new market, which in one hand will promote investments in energy sector, and on the other hand will protect its customers and will support competitiveness, which will bring prices down. So what we are, this is not a new recipe. It has been tested in many countries. It has been successful where it's implemented correctly. What we are trying to achieve is to liberalize generation and supply side of the business of the energy sector, and of course the transmission side will still be regulated, and it will be cost-based regulated. What it will mean for operators, generators, traders, it will mean that we will have prices which will be determined not by someone, but it will be determined by market, which will send signals to the investors if there is a more generation needed. It will promote cross-border trade, and this is one of the solutions to the problem Björn mentioned. We need to develop more cross-border trade and to promote cross-border exchange of power. And for this, there are two things need to be in place. First thing is infrastructure, and we are building infrastructure with all our neighboring countries. We already have existing infrastructure, existing transmission lines, but we are strengthening even more, and we have 10-year network development plan, which envisages strengthening those capacities. And second, not less important, we will have a liberal, competitive approach to cross-border exchange, especially with Turkey and, of course, with other neighboring countries, which will increase volumes of power exchanges, and increased volumes will mean that the cost of the energy, of the transmission will be lower for as more volumes will come. I would also like to mention that we are already transiting not only oil and gas resources, but also electricity We are transmitting east-south direction from Azerbaijan to Turkey, and also north-south direction. So we are positive, we are optimistic that these volumes will increase, and the more power exchange we have, more cross-border electricity trade we have, it will bring benefits to all our citizens and citizens of the regions.
And I think that's, when we look at the geographical position of the country too, that's essential. A question I have to Gary and David, and perhaps David, if you will kick off with this. I mean, obviously at the moment, oil and gas is absolutely essential to economic growth. We need it. There's not enough renewables in place, and hydro is probably not ready to take over not immediately. So we put that in place. This is seen as a very, very important transit country, obviously dependent on imports coming in terms of its energy thing. But on one hand, there's government policy put in place and there's great support for renewables. The headlines at the moment tend to say that oil and gas is on its way out. It's an old industry. But at the same time, they're saying, don't you dare put the lights out until we're ready and we can make that transition. So when we look at the investment that's still needed in traditional sources of energy, in oil and in gas, how do you actually, you know, manage and psychologically, I suppose, deal with that? Because, you know, we see great predictions for demand in the years to come, but at the same time, it's almost like parallel investments that's needed. So how do you ensure that your investment is there?
Thank you. Of course, here in Georgia, we don't have big oil and gas production. In fact, it's negligible. Negligible, all this gas and oil production. But what we do have is the very good contracts, transit contracts, transit pipeline contracts. So, for example, for natural gas from the South Caucasus pipeline, Georgia gets specific volumes of natural gas with a very beneficial price. What we are going to do here in Georgia is that, of course, this story about hydro development is very exciting. It should be developed, but we still need the base energy. That means that during winter time, thermal power plant should be operational, and that's why GOGC built our company, Georgian Oil Gas Corporation, built a new combined cycle thermal power plant 2 years ago, and we have just started construction of a new thermal power plant with Chinese investors, with Chinese banks and Chinese contractor. In addition to that, we need investment in this country to build a gas storage, underground natural gas storage. Unfortunately, we don't have this kind of facility, and that's a big problem because supply of gas from outside of Georgia is more or less even during the year, while our consumption is 80% during winter time. That's why we need to keep store this gas during summer and use it during winter. And GOGC, together with international financial institutions, we have started development of this project. And by 2021, when the volumes of from Shahtanis pipeline is going to be increased by 3-4 times, we should be ready for it. Yes, please. That's what I wanted to.
And again, this question for you, Gary, but also, I mean, when we look at that Southern Gas Corridor and you talk about the 6,000 jobs also that you've already put in place here in Georgia, you know, the importance of the country as a transit country, the work that has been done, and at the same time, then when you look at the headlines and people, is there a sort of, is there a sort of psychological, is it tough to wake up in the morning and think we've still got to do this, even though government and policy is looking more on a renewable, cleaner future?
I don't have any trouble waking up in the morning, actually. It's a privilege to be involved in bringing heat and light to the world, and I think there's a balance, and as leaders, we have to be thinking out the long-term future of the planet, absolutely, for our children and our children's sake. And I don't think there's any doubt that we need to move to a lower carbon world, and everything we're talking about, alternative energy in all its forms, and we're involved in that movement. We're probably I think we are the biggest international oil company involved in wind in the States, for example. So we do need to move there, but at the same time, there are still, I'm afraid, millions of people on this planet that don't have reliable heat and light and water, and the energy demands are increasing. So I think the thing we're trying to do as responsible leaders is think about how do we transition. And I think the first thing we need to move is get away from coal, more into gas, as we've talked about, and even in gas, be really thoughtful about emissions. So not just CO2, but also methane emissions, and improve the technology to reduce the footprint of the hydrocarbons that we are producing. And while we're doing that, also look at developing alternative energies which actually do make money. Because Bjorn said, at the end of the day, you've got to make this so it's a business. And I think we'll crack it. We'll find a way of doing this in these areas. So I think that's the key thing. And then as far as the Southern Gas Corridor goes, there are some, again, for the Caspian, if you look at gas opportunities, there's some fabulous gas opportunities in the Caspian. We're going to start exploring in Shafak Asiman in 2019 and Shah Deniz deep gas. These are, again, potentially huge gas plays. And of course, with the Southern Gas Corridor now built, these become financially quite attractive because you've got an export route in place, and we've designed with our partners Southern Gas Corridor so that it can be expanded very easily to take more gas. So as we find new discoveries, we can utilize the existing pipeline, which also brings diversity of supply, and actually diversity of supply, whether it's where you're getting it from and the type of energy, is really what the future's about. So we embrace that future, and I think there's plenty of challenges ahead for all of us to make sure that we deliver the energy that's required in the best possible way.
Please come ahead.
Yeah, I may sound very pessimistic about the prospects of upstream here, oil and gas upstream, but this is not the case, of course. We believe that currently, of course, we don't have a big production of oil and gas in this country, but we believe that we have sufficient oil and gas here in Georgia to satisfy at least our demand, our local demand. So we've been trying to persuade BP to come here and invest in the upstream sector, like in Azerbaijan, but so far we've been unsuccessful. But maybe you can help us with this, and in this case, I'm sure we'll have more oil and gas, yes. Thank you.
We've got a big fan of the region here with Gary, so once he settles in and he's here, maybe a few more months before we pressure him, but I think it's a good time. Bjorn, we're talking about investment at the moment, and again, looking at investments right across the energy platform, because we really need investment in all sorts of energy. You mentioned that you'd like to see lower tariffs, you'd like to see lower interest rates from the bank, all of that. But again, what can the government do to really help you? Because when we look at hydro, it seems a natural way forward.
Yeah. I think the issue, I think the market or the economics of hydro has changed quite a bit over the last, let's say, 5 years. 5 years because the economics have been hanging a lot on an export model to Turkey, and Turkish electricity prices have been were high as long as the oil and gas prices were high. Now the electricity prices in Turkey have halved compared to where they were. And even the best hydro, and this new Namakhani project that we're developing now is probably the lowest cost hydro project anywhere in Europe of any size that you can develop at the moment. Even that project needs some kind of long-term PPA support for at least being able to service the debt. The lenders have become increasingly concerned about market exposure, given basically the, let's say, deteriorating electricity markets. And hence a framework which the government has put in place now with, let's say, some basic support when the country needs electricity during the winter, combined with access to export markets, is probably the most economical way of getting these projects realized. So we think the government is on the right track in terms of structuring this up. But that's why, basically, for the investor to take a bet on this, we need basically to see functioning markets here in Georgia and overseas. and we need to see interchange so that you actually, because it's something we don't control as investors. It's public infrastructure. And we can pray and look at plans and hope that the government will implement it, but ultimately it's out of our control, which means basically that that is the kind of key investment signals for us, is that the government is moving ahead, building additional capacity to Turkey. TEAS on the Turkish side is actually moving ahead and completing the lines on the Turkish side so that you will have a seamless flow of electricity between the two countries and also other neighboring countries maybe, although they don't pay us as well as Turkey do at the moment. I think that's kind of the key signals that the government can send in order to stimulate investment.
Thank you. And I was at a conference just a few weeks ago, and the CEO for Upstream BP actually reminded the audience that hope is not a strategy. So I thought it was a lovely line to take away from. So it's you need to be maybe praying and hoping a bit more. But again, it sounds like you're putting the pressure on, and it sounds like you're working with people. Bruno, we're coming to the close, and I want you all to just think to give me just a few closing lines in terms of what can happen, what you need to happen very quickly to sort of move to the next level. But Bruno, we've been talking about investment here, and obviously the remit for the bank is about reconstruction and development, but you're not a charity, as you said. Indeed, what can you do when you think, what do you need when it comes to investment, and what can you do in terms of making sure that you're investing in the right place? Georgia seems to be on your radar. It seems to be a good place. You've put a lot of effort in there, and I would imagine you're going to continue to do so. But what would you like to see more of, more help from the government or private enterprise as well, perhaps?
Thank you. Well, first of all, of course, we are not a charity. We are a bank, and we're a bank that belongs to governments, and governments belong to taxpayers. So finally, we are responsible of taking care of the money that the taxpayers of the 67 countries, shareholder of the bank, have given to us so that we can invest in projects that, number one, will return us the investment with a reasonable rate, and second, will achieve our mandate in a number of areas. One of them is transition, one of them is renewable, one of them is green, one of them is environmentally friendly, and so on and so forth. So what we need, obviously what we need is a balance between risks and rewards. The lower the risk, the lower we can set the rates. And for that, what we need is preparation of the projects in a number of angles. The technical angle, for example. What is the risk of completing such a difficult project technically, the NENSCRA, $1 billion? How many things can go wrong when you have such a project of that size? You need to have good advice, good engineers, a number of views. What can go wrong in this area? You can talk about the risk from the legal point of view. I did not mention that, but of course the role of DBRD has been instrumental not only in financing, but in working with governments to create the regulations, to create predictability of the law that allows to lower the risk of the private investors. We have helped each of the governments in where we work, and Georgia is not the exception. On the contrary, it's probably the best example that we have, where we have really been working hand in hand to create the regulations, to create the legal environment, to create the market that will enable this to happen. There are risks that are beyond what we have. Who would have imagined that the price of electricity in Turkey would have halved in a question of 2 years? This was totally unpredictable. In none of the scenarios that we had at the time, we thought that this could happen. It happened. It will affect some of the projects in which we are investing. We will need to take care of that. So to lower the pricing, we need to lower the risks. And I would say that this is a common responsibility of all the parties that are involved, the investor, the government, and the banks. What I would like to see in the future, obviously we have a green mandate. We want to see more renewable. We see that the price of technology is going down. We see how this is changing the industry. It's not a secret. My vice president announced it publicly this morning that I'm Mexican. And I think Mexico is a very good example of a country that used to rely only in oil that is moving into gas, but probably the area of which I'm more proud is moving into solar. And today, Mexico is the lowest cost producer of solar electricity in the world, of 1.7 cents per kilowatt. This is well below any other parameter. And here, I think the paradigm is things can change. You do not have oil. When I was born, I thought the country will have oil forever. The expectative is only for the next 15 years. So pretty much by the time I retire, my children will not have oil, but we need to move to the next one. And this is exactly where I think research and development is going to come. But again, we need to lower the risks of these new technologies.
Now, if we can just wrap up, so Gary, just very, very quickly, a few quick thoughts in terms of what can be done here, particularly in the region, looking at the scenario here in Georgia to make your life better and make your day happier when you do get up with such great energy.
As I said at the start, I think the government has made tremendous progress on making this a very business-friendly environment for people to invest in. I think for everywhere, actually, not just Georgia, the thing is to make sure we're putting money into education and processes into education. The people we need to go forward for this new world are going to be very highly skilled, new skills actually coming through. Certainly a lot of our social investment programs we are putting into education programs as for skills development to make sure they're going to have the skills they need. And I think that's an area I'd focus on. But, and then the other thing we have to do to keep all this going, of course, is we've got to keep the safety moving in the right direction. Our industry, I'm afraid, to me, is still not where we need to be in terms of safety. So I think keeping focus on that, I mean, building pipelines in this terrain is very, very difficult, and we need to make sure that people stay safe.
Thank you so much. Can I have a few closing words from you, David, in terms of, again, what can be quickly done? I mean, I know in the long term we have some great plans out there. What would you like to see done in the very near future?
So we need investments in infrastructure projects in the energy sector, in the local scale, international scale, of course, regional scale. What we have to do, we have to prepare these projects, we have to study these projects, we have to spend money for engineering, for feasibility studies, and I think that's the priority for new projects. Yeah.
No, but in many ways, I mean, as I said in my opening remarks, I think the government here is extremely supportive in terms of investment. They listen to the investors, are trying to facilitate investment. So in terms of the framework around the projects, I think we couldn't ask more than the support that we are receiving from the government. So we are extremely happy with that. It's some market forces as well that we are exposed to, and unfortunately the government cannot control it. We cannot control it. It's part of business, basically, to take a view on that, and that will, to some extent, determine investments going forward.
Super. Bruno?
Yes. Well, listen, obviously Georgia is the great example. You mentioned Tajikistan and electricity. Well, Georgia was not very different in the 90s. This was the black time, and this is the dark time of Georgia. Not only politically, but physically. They didn't have electricity, and today this has turned around. I want to praise the government of Georgia at all levels. I think our Vice President was very clear this morning about how close we work. We collaborate with the Prime Minister, with the different ministries, with the deputy ministers, with the agencies, and how much Georgia is the country that not only is asking, but appreciates and uses the help that we lend and puts it into practice. And to be honest, it's a pleasure to work in a country where our help is so much needed and so much appreciated. Just a closing remark, Georgia is today a country in construction. The institutions of the future are under construction. The roads are under construction. And the four key priorities of the government is really the laying of the future of the country.
Thank you so much. And on that optimistic note, I'm going to hand it back to you, Mr. Ciccovanni. When we look particularly from the Ministry of Energy, you've got some of your key players here who are actually developing the energy sector here for you. You know, for the most part, it sounds like it's a good place to be, and the future looks very bright here in Georgia. But what do you want to move on next? What's important for you?
Of course, opinion of investors and private sector is very important. It always has been important for Georgia, and this is why we have so many projects ongoing. I can say that Georgia will continue dialogue with private sector, with investors, with banks. We are currently under restructuring of our market. As I said, we are working on the new law which will change gas sector, electricity sector. We are hoping that we will have constructive dialogue as we used to with banks and with investors, so we can build this market model which will be acceptable for all sides, which will have transparency, low risks, as Bruno said, and which everybody will gain, citizens as well as investors. So we are hoping with more dialogue with our partners and of course with our neighboring countries as well, because without collaboration with our neighbors, it will be very difficult for us to develop in isolation.
Super. Well, thank you all for those closing thoughts, and we are unfortunately out of time. We'd love a session, maybe we'll do it the next time, where we will get a bit more interaction with our audience too. That would be good. But I really want to thank everybody here for your views and your efforts putting in. And I think when we look back on this discussion, really we can see that very much Georgia is a reliable transit country. This is the main focus of the country at the moment. It's not a country rich with its own natural resources, but it certainly has taken huge advantage of its geographical position and its very strategic position in the world, where we're looking at the tremendous work that BP and the oil companies and the gas and everybody is playing in this, moving all of that gas from the east of the Caspian, literally all the way over to Italy and areas like that. So that's no mean feat to actually put in place all of that work. Obviously a huge domestic population here, and a growing population that needs to also be fed with energy as well. They need energy, they need jobs, they need economic development here. But also I think it's tremendous to hear from the key players here that they have found the government very supportive, because many, many times I think this is the big obstacle in saying that the government's not doing enough and not willing to do enough. And if nothing else, I think without a doubt that political will is there, the commitment is there, and indeed the focus there. And also I just think the openness that the government is listening to everybody, how important that is, that it's not sort of, it's not all one-sided, whereby it's everybody's mutual interest that all of these developments are in place, and that this country becomes very much that very sort of rich and hopefully very wealthy highway along the way, because it's putting everything in place, and the future is looking bright, and you deserve all the benefits for it, and again for all of the people in Georgia. We leave it there. Once again, a huge thank you to our panel here. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us at this session. We really hope that you've got some good engagement and information. Thank you again. Now, just before you go, if I could make a quick announcement, we're going to have some MOUs been signed outside. The Georgia Investment SCS, the subsidiary of CEFC Shanghai Financial Services, and the JSC Partnership Fund will sign a shareholders agreement. So we're going to have all of that going on outside. And also then a second one, the Partnership Fund with the Chinese Jiangxi Water and Hydropower Construction will also sign a memorandum of understanding. So all of that is going on just outside. Be sure and join them, support them, and again, more projects for Georgia. So it's all very good. Thank you again. Thank you.
No, because we were on the GITI and some Armenians.
Built on innovation, no great surprise when one considers that China is already home to the world's largest online population. No great surprise either then that digital connectivity is central to this Belt and Road project. For many, and we talked a lot about that this morning, Belt and Road unsurprisingly conjures up images of massive rail, road and port construction, the huge transport infrastructure, the very skeleton of the project, if you like. As a result, what is often referred to as the information or digital Silk Road can play second fiddle to that impressive physical connectivity piece. But that is to overlook the enormity of this digital connectivity bit in the Belt and Road project. The ability to use data and technology to further enhance the flow of goods and services along the route. As we look to the future, this is for many the crucial component of any innovative, intelligent economy. And any economy with an eye on growth and development must surely be innovative and intelligent. State-owned and private Chinese enterprises have been very quick to start the infrastructure bill, telecoms infrastructure, as well as network services provisions. Other tech companies are vying to get a piece of this action as well. The economic ramifications, which we'll talk about today, are obvious enough. Massive trade volume in cross-border e-commerce, something, again, we talked about this morning. Retail, manufacturing, travel, financial services, all set to dance to this tune. There are challenges as well, though. A lack of ICT infrastructure, lack of interoperability, underdeveloped regulatory environments, issues of transparency, of accountability as some of those challenges. And let's throw cybersecurity in there as well. Lots to discuss over the next 45 minutes to an hour. Let me introduce our panel. I'll do it from over here, working this way round. I'm then going to shuffle the order just to shake it up a little bit for the opening speeches. Mr. Istvan Lepsenyi, at the end there, State Secretary for Economic Development and Regulations at the Ministry for National Economy of Hungary. Xiaofeng Deng, the CEO of China Telecom. Next to me, Brahima Sanu, Director of the Telecommunications Development Bureau. To my left, Mr. Georgi Keshishvili, Deputy Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development here in Georgia. Mr. Lawrence Meredith, Director for Neighbourhood East, DG NEAR at the European Commission. Dr. Stefka Slavova is a lead economist at the World Bank. And finally, on the end, Mr. Agagec Gregorian, First Deputy Minister in the Ministry of Transport, Communications and IT, the Republic of Armenia. So as I said, a really well-rounded panel to throw around all these different pieces. What we're going to do is do what was done this morning. Each panelist will get 2 or 3 minutes. I'm trying to keep this a little bit tight at the top to lay out their stand, if you like, and then we'll really try and open it up into an interactive dialogue after that. Georgie, I'd like you to go first, if possible. I mentioned in my opener that this is a subject many feel is underexplored, despite the huge potential.
The thing in this sector is that what we say in the Georgia is somehow some reform or some achievements what we have in this field. Is that this digitalization is the project, and it itself is this area where we have a first, there's a number, major goal, and the achievement is that we have a free and business-friendly environment in this field. We have, on the other hand, we have this business open economy, and on the second hand, we have a very skilled and then very strong regulatory body. And without this, there is no chance to develop this sector and then development of this field. For this number of the reforms, I will not go in details of these reforms. I would just say that in general, Georgia, that use of this corridor is of this location, of the geographical location. It means that when we see that Belt and Road connectivity also, it's important that this is not only the infrastructure of the roads and highways and etc. This also this connectivity between and use this corridor as a route to cooperate with the East and in the West world, and to give this platform for use this as a country, as a free economy, free market, and then with the regulatory and modern regulations. We have this association agreement with the European Union signed 2014, and is something our map where we are going to achieve all these goals, to achieve this market and development in this field.
Okay. Deputy Minister, thank you very much indeed. We'll pick up on many pieces of that when we have our discussion, especially the regulation piece. So thank you very much indeed for that. Brahima, you're up next, and I know you're going to talk about the SDGs as well. Whether you start with that is another thing, but go ahead.
Thank you very much, Axel. From ITU. To present ITU, I'm going to ask 2 questions very quickly. Who knows where you get the country code from in this room here? Like 995 for Georgia. Who knows? Okay, it's ITU. Second thing, why do you buy a telephone set or a TV set in any country you go to? Your country is working? ITU, standard. This is what I present ITU. Thank you very much, colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be here. Of course, we have been constrained to have just 2 minutes now. I'm going to jump.
We'll give you 2.5.
Yes, okay. Let me go straight. I wanted to talk a bit about the ICT environment, but let me go straight to the 2 points I would like to make just to trigger the discussion in this room. The first one, talking about infrastructure, is that more and more we need to have a different definition for infrastructure. In the past, we see infrastructure only as physical infrastructure. More and more now, we are extending, at least the community is extending the definition of infrastructure to other soft infrastructure like big data that become now considered as an infrastructure when you see all the possibility developed on it. So my second point is that we need to have a strategic approach for the ICT infrastructure in two ways. One way is to move from the vertical type infrastructure building to a horizontal infrastructure building. So far, you will see that the road will build their own infrastructure, electricity will build their own infrastructure, telecommunication will build their own infrastructure, and you find yourself in the same country with parallel infrastructure. At the end of the day, they don't serve the purpose of development because they become very expensive, and they don't serve the purpose of development itself because they become expensive. So we have to change our mind. When you're thinking about infrastructure, just think about one infrastructure, which is, should be horizontal and be used by all the people. And you can see, let me give an example. In 2000 already, I was making a presentation in front of African ministers. I was telling them, you need to go from your small infrastructure to one infrastructure. And I was telling them, when you are building a road, it is a good time for you also to make some room and for the telecommunication cables, because it becomes a marginal cost. The civil work is the most expensive. When they're building a road and you do it at that time, it becomes just marginal. Today is even more important because we are talking about smart transportation, and they will need actually this capacity. Another reason to build together. And the second we have to see here is about considering the infrastructure as a public good. Because it has become so important, the ICT infrastructure has become so important for the development for other sectors that it should, at least in the conceptual manner, be considered as an infrastructure good, a public good. I'm not saying that it should belong to the government, but the approach should be a public good. These are the 2 points I would like to throw for the discussion. Of course, we'll have the opportunity to come back to that.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm glad you mentioned that at the end. The Slovakian Deputy Minister made that point this morning, the role of connectivity and broadband in other areas, learning, public services, civics, social cohesion, entertainment, etc., etc. So yes, a very important piece. Lawrence, you are up next. We heard from Henrik this morning. He referred to digitization and said, look, this needs to be the common denominator here. Tell us how the Commission is supporting digitization in this space.
Thank you, Axel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank Georgi and all the Georgian government for hosting this fantastic conference of Tbilisi Belt and Road Forum. It's really a great pleasure to be back in Tbilisi for this occasion. What I'd like to do with my 4 minutes is to say, firstly, why does digital matter to the European Union itself? And then I'd like to look at this challenge. I'm responsible for relations between the European Union and the so-called Eastern Partnership, so Georgia, the rest of the Caucasus, Belarus, Moldova, Ukraine, and to look at those challenges, and in so doing to answer Axel's question. Firstly, in 2015, when President Juncker's Commission was just in office, it was clear that the digital single market was one of the 10 priorities of the Juncker Commission. And what does that mean in practice? There are 500 million consumers, and our aim is by 2020 to invest 700 million euros on the whole 5G investment. The aim is to multiply the data traffic by 1,000, increase the number of smartphone devices by 100, and to, relative to 4G, data transmission will be 100 times more effective. At the same time, we had the Eastern Partnership Summit in Riga, and there the language was, as Axel said in his introduction, isn't this an untapped potential? And what are we going to do about it? So in my second part, looking back over the last 2.5 years, what have we done about it? Well, this conference couldn't come at a better moment because on Friday last week, 34 heads of state and government from the 28 European Union member states and the 6 Eastern Partnership countries gathered in Brussels for the 5th Eastern Partnership Summit, the first since 2015, and their digital was truly recognized as a key issue going forwards. A big step forward relative to this untapped potential, what are we going to do about it, only 2.5 years ago. And I think that shows the recognition is dawning on all the leaders that this is an area where we've been missing a trick for too long. And I had the pleasure of being in Tallinn just 6 weeks ago, and we have the Estonian presidency of the European Union right now. And Estonia is a market leader in e-governance. And under their presidency, they've made 2 things a particular priority. They've made digital, per se, and they held a big digital summit for the EU in Tallinn. And back-to-back with that, because the second priority is the Eastern Partnership itself. So back-to-back, they held a digital ministerial between the EU and the Eastern partners. And there, I think we really made a big step forward. We have a clear agreement on a policy agenda. And it's very simple. We agreed on 4 things that we want to be doing, which is e-commerce, e-customs, e-logistics, and e-health. And we agreed on 4 things that we need to get it done. We need innovation. We need skills, and that's a really key point. And I'm sure Stefka is going to say more about that. And we need trust. So this cyber security point that Axel mentioned earlier is absolutely key. And of course, we need the rules in place, and that's where we started this discussion about the regulations. So looking ahead, and now I'll wrap up, we think that 2.5 years on from the last Eastern Partnership Summit, there's a clear recognition that digital's key, so we recognize its importance. We've agreed on what the priorities are. I've just set them out. So what we need to do now is get the investment. And that's why I think that this conference that brings together the EU, the Eastern Partnership, and other key actors, China, the Gulf, I think it's fascinating to come here together. And I can only re-underline what the 34 heads of state and government said. Going forward, we need digitalized and innovation-driven growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Lawrence. I've just realized that whooshing sound is the air conditioning, so it should be a little bit cooler in here shortly. Now, let's hear from the corporate on our panel. I just want to mention the communique from the Belt and Road Forum back in May made direct reference to innovation action plans for e-commerce and the digital economy. Your company, along with 2 others, is investing, I believe, almost $200 billion in 5G infrastructure over the next few years. You clearly realize this potential.
谢谢. Well, I prefer speaking in Chinese. It's
not a problem.
More easy for
not
me.
A problem.
我先有关中国电信，我们现在大概为接近6亿600 million subscribers 为他们提供服务，那么接近2亿6千万的移动用户。那么对于我们来讲，所以服务于这么广大的用户，我们在这个信息化、智能化。智慧城市还有这个 vertical application 方面，我们有很多丰富的应用，所以我非常感谢格鲁吉亚政府安排这样的一个机会，给我们和我们的来自全球各地的同行们，我们来一起交流和各国的这个有关的机构。对于这一次会议的主题，我理解这个digital connectivity， 我想大概20-30年前，在中国开始发展的前期， 交通、公路、通讯、电力都是非常薄弱的。过去在中国有一句话叫“要想富，先修路”。几十年过去了，通讯行业发生了巨大的变化，我们取得了巨大的进展。过去长期制约各个国家各个地区经济发展的道路、电力、通讯这些，今天在中国，通讯已经不是瓶颈了，那就是因为数字化的连接，通讯的发展带给了经济创造了这个经济持续发展的可能。所以我理解今天的这个主题Digital Connectivity 对于各个区域经济的发展十分重要。所以在今后我们在中国来讲，我们计划在2020年我们开始5G 的商用的建设。今天4G 在中国的覆盖大概已经达到98%的区域。今天中国的 FTTH 光纤这个的覆盖已经超过90%的区域。所以正是由于通讯带给人们生活的巨大的变化，所以使我们很多一些过去不可想象的应用今天成为可能。所以我觉得这就是数字化连接、通讯带给经济的改变，带给人们生活的改变。谢谢。
Thank you very much, Mr. Deng. Next up is Mr. Gadget Grigoryan, the first Deputy Minister from the Republic of Armenia. Sir, the floor is yours.
Do you hear me? Oh, thank you, Axel. You see the connectivity, we are different a little bit. It's my pleasure to participate in this Belt and Road Forum in Tbilisi. Let me start by emphasizing that a new chapter opened in the EU-Armenia relations at 5th Eastern Partnership Summit that took place in November 14 in Brussels this year. The Armenia signed a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement. This agreement sets an inclusive legal basis for strengthening the political dialogue and expanding economic cooperation, and intended to create new opportunities for mutual trade and investments and the cooperation in the areas of energy, transportation, tourism, and intellectual exchange. Moreover, there is also a new beginning in terms of connectivity, a common aviation area agreement with Armenia, and the extension of EU's Trans-European Transport TNT network to Armenia was endorsed. Now let's go back to digital and its challenges. Since 2013, Belt and Road Initiative became the transnational driver for development of infrastructure-based solutions connecting people and nations along. Since the beginning of the third millennium, connectivity and road infrastructure issues are always considered as top priorities for our country. We may be better than anyone feeling negative impact of loss of international connectivity for transportation and telecommunication, as well for civil society, stable and dynamic development. High-capacity digital connectivity may become one of the best opportunities for countries along the Belt and Road to ensure growth and development of economies, helping them compete more effectively and move towards knowledge-based economies. Behind the economy, broadband is also increasingly a key conduit of modern society in terms of learning, public services, social cohesion, enterprise, entertainment, and more. Hereby, existing cross-border infrastructure need to be leveraged to the best possible extent. Digital connectivity now is not only the connection tool, but instrument integrating logistics, transport, energy and telecommunications infrastructure, trade routes and corridors. ICT and universal high-speed connectivity is one of the crucial elements for creating overlay solutions, but not enough to cover all challenges of digital area. But even economies that have good ICT infrastructure still sometimes struggle to translate their connectivity into business, which is even more important now to ensure sustainable and correlated growth. A large portion of regions, emerging markets, and developing countries especially do quite well on the infrastructure side, but have yet not to translate their connectivity into business usage. This suggests the presence of barriers to access and use of the existing technologies, lack of ICT infrastructure or interoperability and of continuity of information flows can limit gains available from digitalization. We believe that transnational initiatives should be considered as an umbrella driver contributing balanced development of different national ecosystems in terms of facilitation of international cooperation worldwide. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. State Secretary Istvan Lepsenyin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer to this beautiful and very interesting event. I think that all of us gives and will give a lot of information. Hungary considers the One Belt, One Road initiative as a very important initiative. It's in line with our development plan, Eastern Opening Development Plan, which opens new possible markets. Also, Hungary was the first European country who signed the Memorandum of Understanding between China and Hungary, and that time we formed a working group, and we are very systematically moving on. This year and early next year, Hungary is visiting the Visegrad 4 countries, and one of the main items, this is the digital Visegrad, the connection, how we can dismantle the barriers, how we can improve the connection between the countries. In these days, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, Budapest is hosting the China Eastern European countries meeting, 16+1, and I must be frank that I prefer to be here actually than in Budapest. During this meeting, there is a lot of important and interesting discussion, and also from our side, we signed several memorandums of understanding between Chinese companies and Hungarian companies in the field of telecommunication, including the space companies, and also between the governmental discussion of how we can improve the connection, the digital connection between China and Hungary. And basically, Hungary also started the implementation of the physical connection, because soon we will start the construction of Budapest-Belgrade highway, which is the part of the railway, which is the part of the railway from Piraeus to Europe. So we are doing our task as well. If you look at the situation at Hungary about the digital and the telecommunication, due to a recent survey, Hungary is on the 3rd place in the speed of internet. We are above 42 mega, which is not a bad position. And if you look at the accessibility, we are on the 6th place with 68%. So we are moving step by step forward. But we want to do even more, and we elaborated our digital strategy. We call it the Digital Welfare Program, which covers, number one, the infrastructure. By the end of the next year, we will provide to every household in Hungary a minimum 30 megabyte connection, the minimum, and every household, every others what we have. And we have a selection or pre-selection of SMEs, especially SMEs, who are ready for the new era of Industry 4.0, the digitalization of the industry. And for those SMEs, with approximately 1,000, we will provide a 1 giga connection by the end of next year. And also, to make the internet more accessible, we reduce the VAT to 5% next year. It's a little bit against the European Union, but we think that it's very important. In Hungary, we have 27% VAT, and for internet, we have only 5%. So we want to enlarge the use of the internet. Of course, you cannot do anything without the education. So we have to start the education in the kindergarten. Programming is some sort of language, so you have to learn programming at the same time that you learn your mother tongue. So this is the task, part of the task of the kindergarten. If we look at the education, let's say vocational training, we know that in the next 10 years, 80% of the existing skills will either disappear or change drastically because of the digitalization. So we have to change the education, the mindset of the people. And if we are speaking about the high education, just looking at the fact we have 22,000 missing software engineers, but the most important that we have to introduce new disciplines like handling big data, autonomous driving, we have MBA for Industry 4.0. So these are the big steps. And also, the last point, that we have to be prepared for the transformation of the digital transformation of the economy. We will have smart companies. We will have smart cities. We will have autonomous and connected cars. We will have intelligent factories. We will have precision agriculture. So these are all the elements which requires a new digital connection. And the technology for that is the 5G. For early next year, we will start the first 5G experiment, and during next year, we will extend the 5G. And in this work, we set up a coalition, the so-called 5G coalition, and this 5G coalition, or Chinese partners take part, Huawei, ZTE, and others, and it will provide also the connection between Hungary and China. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oops, sorry. Thank you very much indeed. Finally, let's hear from Stefka Slavova from the World Bank, and I know you've got a little bit to say on the skills side. So let's delve into that a little bit.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Just briefly on my side, by way of introduction, I represent the Trade and Competitiveness Global Practice, which is one of the departments, if you like, of the World Bank Group. I'm lead economist based in Almaty, and I work in the 5 Central Asian countries. So it's a great pleasure and honor to be here, and I've been listening very carefully what my fellow panelists have been saying, and with respect to how we think about the digital economy, I would refer you to our report, World Development Report, which is the flagship World Bank publication, which is an annual publication, and its edition from 2016 is based on, is called Digital Dividends, and it deals with all of these issues that we are grappling with today. But if we want to put a framework around it, basically the way we approach this topic is it's based on 3 pillars, right? The hard infrastructure, which is the cables, the fiber optics, and then the skills part, and the citizens, companies, SMEs, businesses, which all have to have the relevant skills in order to avail themselves of available technology. And the third part is the regulatory. Regulations of telecoms markets, pro-competitive, open, and allowing access to entry into telecoms markets, all of these issues that are hugely important. So basically it's a triad of topics and issues, the skills, the infrastructure, but as somebody mentioned before me, you may have the infrastructure in place, but if you don't have the right skills or the right regulations in place, then you have nothing and you are lagging behind. And in fact, this is what the report that I just mentioned finds out, that many emerging markets, many developing economies are lagging behind because of digital entrepreneurship, lagging of skills, and so on. So my practice offers various solutions to assess these skills gaps. We work on with different diagnostic tools to assess how firms are using available digital technologies. I'm pleased to hear that in Georgia we also work in this area of innovation, supporting startups, and trying to encourage firms to use new technologies through grant schemes, matching grants, and so on. And we do similar work in Kazakhstan. So that's I can talk in more detail about some of how we do it in practice. Another thing that I think is important in this whole, how to make the digital economy in the World Bank lingo contribute to alleviating poverty and having shared and inclusive growth, and it can do a lot in that respect, but again, not many countries are able to really reap the benefits of the digital revolution and Industry 4.0 and smart cities and whatnot, is really having this nexus between the pillars, the digital consumers, the digital government, and digital businesses. Or some people call it e-government. And some countries like Estonia, we have great examples even in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, that have really managed to transform the way governments work and provide services to companies and citizens, and the way also the companies flexible and agile enough to use these technologies. By way of example, I would like to mention a recent project. It's a regional project, and it really builds into this whole Belt and Road Initiative discussion from where I'm based in Central Asia, in Almaty. Huge interest. We have launched a so-called Digital CASA, which stands for Central Asia, South Asia connectivity. Essentially, it works on all of the three mentioned pillars that I highlighted. On the hard infrastructure, linking Central Asian countries and South Asian countries to broadband networks and cables in China, to kind of substitute as well from some of the European links that come from under the sea, submarine links. So that presumably will make it cheaper and also more increased penetration. So that's one thing we're trying to help with. And there is a lot of positive take-up of this. The Kyrgyz Republic, it's a series of projects, so countries are interested. Kazakhstan is next in line. Uzbekistan is also planning, has expressed interest. And Tajikistan and Turkmenistan will probably follow suit in the near future. But it's also a project that looks at competition policy issues, which are critical, and also looks at the skills issues that I mentioned. So let me stop here and perhaps then get involved later.
Very good. Stefka, thank you very much indeed. Right. Lots of food for thought, lots to throw around. I'm going to do just that now. I've got a wary eye on the time, but so we'll try and keep this quick and interactive. Stefka, I'm going to come straight back to you, actually. You mentioned Georgia, so I'm going to put you really on the hot spot now and ask you how the World Bank assesses Georgia's connectivity generally right now to the global marketplace. How do you rate that right now? And then the Deputy Minister can have a right to reply.
Yes, well, when we think of Georgia, I actually had the chance just before this session to discuss with the Deputy Minister a little bit of how we are supporting. In short, Axel, it's in the middle. So if we speak a little only about digital connectivity, I looked at a graph which charts all the countries with respect to their income per capita and how they are ranking in terms of, broadly speaking, digital connectivity measured by various things. And Georgia is actually a little bit above the average in terms of what its predicted level should be. The fitted line is, with respect to its income per capita, is a little bit above. However, given its relief, its terrain, there are mountain areas that are more challenging to secure access to internet, and I think that's a challenge that the government is very much aware of and is working on. But the Minister may want to elaborate further.
Thank you, and then we will continue these discussions before this session. And the programs of the reforms, what the government at this moment has, we have like the 4-pillar reform, and one of the major reforms there is the infrastructure. And within this infrastructure, it means also the development of the fiber optic the network to the population where they live more than 200 persons. And this is a state program, and this is under the Ministry of Economy. But on the other hand, there is a program where we are working with different international organizations, and then we have like the pilot program also, where we implemented internet in the high mountain region of Georgia, like Tusheti, where the resettlement is less than 200 persons, and with the support of the ISOC, with the participation of the Innovation Technology Agency and the Ministry of Economy, and also our National Regulatory Commission, we established there like the community for this, and then we have like the population in this area where there is still no mobile, but these people, they have internet and high-speed internet, and this gives this is a touristic destination as well, where this 8 months is closed the road because of the snow in the high mountains, and still these people, they have this internet, and this is a development also not only for the internet and digitalization, it gives a stimulus for development for the tourism, development of the manufacturing. This is nowadays, this connectivity is not only something for the infrastructure, this is more global, it involves everything like the socially and economic sides as well. And so this is very important, and we have very good cooperation with this field, with our friends there.
Thank you very much indeed. Feel free, by the way, anyone to jump in at any time. This is the way I want to continue this dialogue. But Lawrence, let me come to you on regulation. I mean, it seems to me underdeveloped regulation or regulatory environments, often playing catch-up, are clearly an obstacle in this whole process. Give us how would you characterize this sort of generally for the Eastern Partnership?
Thanks, Axel. No, absolutely. As I said, I think we see as the first priority in terms of what needs to be done next, the whole issue of harmonization of digital markets are the rules and regulations, and that can access to broadband. We're discussing the whole issue of roaming tariffs, roaming prices. These are key issues that we are wrestling with and addressing inside the European Union, and we believe that the rules and regulations that we're setting out are a good basis to work with the Eastern Partnership. One of the things that we will be doing with the major support that we foresee, and at the last week's summit, Commissioner Hahn announced 50 million euros investment over the next 4 years in digital, which is a big step up in our commitment. One of the things we will be doing is a gap analysis of what the areas are that most need to be addressed across the 6 Eastern Partnership countries. And I'd like to underline, as I concluded my last point, that the rules and regulations are one part of it, but investment is key now, and that this is a partnership that we want to be doing with the European Investment Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and the World Bank, and that's why it's so good. They're all here today, together with the Asian Development Bank as well.
All right, very good. Brahima, give us a quick word from the ITU's perspective on regulation.
Thank you very much, Axel. First time I was very disciplined. Let me be polite now by thanking the organizers of this very important event. I just want to compliment what my colleague have said about the regulation. More and more we are advocating for collaborative regulation, because more and more, as someone said it very well this morning, ICT became the common denominators. Let me take a few examples. When you take the case of e-commerce, it is no longer the telecom regulation alone that will deal with the e-commerce. It is no longer the commerce regulation alone that will deal with the e-commerce. Then you have an overlap here and what we call collaborative regulation. And we need to go to collaborative regulation if we really want ICT to play the role they are meant to play for the development of the society.
I'd also be interested, Mr. Deng, to get the corporate's perspective on the regulatory environment. If you could incorporate that into a response to a question around what China Telecom sees as the next big milestones and the next big challenges ahead in this process.
I think there is a demand between China to Europe and through the Belt and Road, a huge demand, especially the communication demand. But right now, sometimes it's very hard. It's a challenge for all the carrier. Through the submarine cable, there is a model, business model. But through the terrestrial cable, there is no this kind of model. So we need to find a new business model, try to organize through the road, the different countries' carrier together, find a new model. Just like the submarine cable clubber.
How optimistic are you in finding that model, and who are you working, collaborating together with to find it?
It's like China Telecom. Right now we already rise this kind of initiative, like through the China to Kyrgyzstan to the Afghanistan, use their existing fiber and try to make a clubber. And we try to use the one NOC to manage the quality of the communication. Same initiative, we try to rise to the Georgia and Azerbaijan and also Turkey carrier. Let's together make a new route through the Asia to Central Asia to Europe. That's, I think, this is a challenge. We raised this kind of initiative 5 years ago, but very hard. It's a different country, their regulations, and I think we need, because there is a demand there, we should meet this kind of demand. All the carrier, we can get the benefit from this kind of a business. But I think we should overcome some tackle, try to make some success for this kind of the new business model.
Okay, interesting, thank you. Mr. Grigoryan, I want to pick you up on something you mentioned at the top, and I know I'm jumping around here, but sort of translating this into business, I think is the language you used. I guess finding the premium in all of this. And there's some astonishing numbers out there. I think it's the UN that says was a 10% increase in broadband access equals about a 2/10 rise in per capita GDP. I mean, statistics like that are thrown out at us all of the time. Talk to us a little bit about how you see us translating this into business sense.
For the government. For the government, it's very important to do that. So for our intention is what we have done previously. So we are very soft taxation system for the ICT sector. This is the first thing that the government made. And still now, we are one of the liberal taxation system on this sector. Secondly, we started to be connected to the whole world. So in the 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we were thinking that the cable optic is the more important thing as an infrastructure, as a physical infrastructure system that we have to build along the roads, along the railways, and all the other. I'm coming from the transport sector, so my previous job, and all the time I'm in the transport. So, but now I see that there will not be any area in the economy without ICT. So in the future, maybe we will have technological companies dealing with construction, transport, logistics, tourism, and everything. So it's the future. And this is why we are thinking that we have to support as a government. We are trying to digitalize all the services that the government have to give to their citizens. This is very important in the first phase. We also face a dilemma years ago when we were thinking to start, what to start. To start to make content in Armenian, or to start to teach all the population in English language, or the other languages spoken, which has a big content on the internet, because this is an education issue. So we need to think on our future of the people of living in my country. So this was a dilemma at that time. But now we solve it, and we go further. Now, and we are trying to give all the possibility to the business to develop it. Moreover, the government is not pushing the business in this area. The business is pushing us.
Okay, good. And is it the same experience in Hungary, Mr. Lepsini?
Yes, yes, of course. I'm looking at this question from industry point of view. And I think that one of the biggest tasks of the government to prepare the industry for this digital connection. So it's not enough that we will have a 1 giga connection to a SME if the SME is not prepared to use the huge amount of data, to handle the huge amount of data and so on. So we do some sample factories in Hungary to teach them, to show them how to do that. The other example is the regulation question. Technically, from technical point of view, actually an autonomous and connected car could drive from Budapest to Tbilisi without driver. The issue that, as of today, the car should stop at every border, because in every country we have different regulation, different frequency, different traffic laws, and so on and so forth. So what we are doing in Hungary, that we have a agreement between the surrounding countries how to get cross-border. So we just agreed with Slovenia, Austria, Hungary, Germany, that from the Slovenian port, let's say Koper, how can the tax drive autonomously via sea border and reaching the German A9. So this is also a regulation question, how you will regulate, not speaking about the privacy, the security, the safety, the usage of the data, and so on and so forth.
Okay, Brahima. Oh, did you want to come in?
Yes,
Go,
please.
Yes,
yeah. About the business side of it.
Yes.
Let me just add to what was just said. You know, we can see today that the voice business is getting to saturation. The real business of the future today is data business. On this data business, I think that there is a part we are not yet explored enough. This is using ICTs, what I call for development. For example, if you take developing countries, no operator will go to put an optical fiber in the rural areas. It will be a limitation. But if the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Health start using this infrastructure, then we have a reason for the private sector to roll out the infrastructure. So then the private sector should see today that there is an expansion. They used to work with the companies, with the business, with the enterprises. Now there is an expansion of, at least in the domain, they can create new market. And today I would see health, education, agriculture, commerce are new clients for the ICT sector. And we should all work towards that. And this connected to what I call, and you can do it when doing development. This comes with a connection of using ICT for the sustainable development goals, because we can do both.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned that. It was a question I was going to ask you. I can take that one now. Lawrence.
Yeah, I just want to come back to this whole issue of digital skills, because when Henrik Hololai concluded his speech this morning, which he talked a lot about transport infrastructure, he said, when we're talking about roads, it's important to not forget that it's all about people. And I think in terms of this digital revolution, we need to start from the people. And I think it's great that we're being hosted here in Tbilisi, because the Caucasus is actually leading the way in many ways. Georgia has set education as its #1 priority of its 4-point program. Armenia, there is a spectacularly impressive digital skills center called the TUMO Center that both our Commissioner for Innovation and our Commissioner for Neighborhood recently visited. And Azerbaijan has also put education as a very high priority, and we were visiting vocational education and training. So I think investing in people is going to be a key part of this equation.
All right. Look, I'm very wary of the time. I know carriages are going to leave for the dinner in about sort of 40 minutes. So let me just ask one final question, and then I'd just like to give everyone a really, really quick opportunity to provide a final thought. It's a bit of a leading question, this. It's a bit provocative, but I wear a journalist's hat now when I do this. Do we, and anyone, please come in on this, do we worry about China's dominance in the infrastructure, in overseeing a lot of this project work? To what extent do we worry about that? Anybody?
Okay. Let me try. Actually, it depends the way you see the issue of the infrastructure. If you see it as just an infrastructure, then you may have a different perspective. But if you see the infrastructure just as a means to provide a service, so you are more focusing on the service. This is what I said in my introductory remark. Let's not focus too much on the infrastructure, but let's focus on the services we are providing with the infrastructure. Then who is building the infrastructure is less important than the services we are deriving from the infrastructure. Having said that, of course, my colleague could come, but this is what I would say. Okay. It's a very delicate question, but...
It is a delicate question.
In general, there is this globalization. It gives these countries without borders. And so if we see these challenges and these new developments and this development that comes from any country, it doesn't make any name over this. So I think that in this regard, the major issue for the countries and the governments is to make a stable security systems for their own securities. But in other fields, the market should be open. And so this is where we are taking our country in this field.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah, go ahead. Very, very quickly, then I got to get a final comment. No.
I think it's worked now. So very quickly, you ask, do we worry? No, because the future, we believe, is without the cross-border crossings, without any kind of, let's say, differences between the people. Nobody don't care about the nationality, the religion, and the borders must be open. So in this case, China is making a huge investment in the future of the world. So this is that we are not worrying.
I'm not going to push it any further. I'm going to get a final comment from each of you, though. And let me. This is the question I have for you, and it's a sort of open question. And do keep these responses very brief, if you could. 2 years from now, when we're sitting on this stage, how different is this panel and what we're talking about going to look? Do you think? Let's start this side and work this way. No, you want to go this way? Anyone? Why doesn't anyone throw this up? I'm asking how far we're going to have come and how quickly, based on what we've said, based on what we see. Anyone? Lawrence?
Well, I started by saying how far we'd come in the last 2.5 years, where we were just at the stage of realizing what an important question the untapped potential was. And I said that we've already, since then, clearly recognized it's a key policy priority. And we've agreed what we want to be doing about it in terms of the rules, the skills, the trust, and the investment. And I think what you'll find when we look from now, 2 years from now, is that there has been much more substantial investment. I think you could see that's coming down the road. I think you will see a much clearer understanding of digital strategies in each of the countries, and that will include analysis of what they individually need to be doing, whether it's on the infrastructure, the skills, or seeking foreign investment.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Brahima.
Okay, thank you very much, Axel. Your question is very dangerous. Because in the ICT sector, we are talking about exponential acceleration of everything. So it's dangerous to predict anything. You will remember that Bill Gates made a very wrong prediction about the needs of people in the capacity. So I don't think anybody will venture. But what I want to say here is that I hope that in the 10 coming years, this panel doesn't discuss about infrastructure any longer. Then we go beyond infrastructure and be discussing about the skills, because this is one of the issues, and about the usage of the infrastructure. What I'm saying here is that infrastructure should have been built enough not to be an issue for discussion anymore. These were my expectations.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Mr. Deng.
I think the 2 years later, I think more investment to the ICT area. I think it will be the big changes for the human life, especially on the Belt and Road Initiative, the nearby countries. Of course, I also want to answer the last questions. I think for Chinese enterprise, we just focus on our business. We don't want to control the govern the different facility. Try to cooperate with the different carrier. That's the Chinese culture. I think there's maybe somebody else have the, I think it's not right worry. I think this worry is not necessary. We just want to have our business. We try to deliver our experience to our partners. Let's together to do the best digital connectivity to changes the human life. That's my answer.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, in 2 years' time, I think that we will speak less about the infrastructure, because the development of the infrastructure can be calculated. It's heavy money, so you can count on that, unless there will be some new disruptive technology or there will be some new business models. It will change everything. And in 2 years' time, perhaps we will speak about the artificial intelligence, that are we in the age that artificial intelligence will take over, or still we have 2 more years?
Yes, well, again, I was also thinking along similar lines. I think we stand at a unique time, in a sense. That I hope and I believe there is more trust in a lot of the countries that I see in this region. I've been working in Europe and Central Asia and pretty much along this corridor, or various corridors that the Belt Road is encompassing. And I think now with the way Uzbekistan is opening up and other countries, you have I think we are at a good juncture where trust is building up. I feel very positive. If we speak about digital, who knows? I mean, the next 2 years is a long time, the way things are progressing. Maybe we'll find ourselves here in need of newer regulations, grappling with new technology. I would like also to see here more new businesses, you know, or businesses that are, for instance, exporting, using e-trade that we touched upon this morning, and successfully from these countries, from the Caucasus, from Central Asia, and that are, in a way, leaders in some of their market niches. So that's my wish for 2 years from now.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very quickly.
So if very quickly, I really appreciate the intervention of my Chinese colleagues. So really everybody is doing his business, and we hope that this connectivity, the digital connectivity, will help all the nations to bring their input in all the worldwide businesses. So this is our intention.
Thank you very much indeed. And Deputy Minister, let's have a final word.
Thank you for this question, because we see that without the opening market, without the there is no development. And so this is something that we expect, that spending quite a lot of funds in infrastructure, this gives, without this connectivity, there is no other chance. So we see that this is a future. This is a future where we can invest, and then we can find some new companies, new startups, and this region has a huge potential for developing these businesses and then to export in all over the world. So we see that this is a future here.
All right. Thank you very much indeed to everybody on the panel. I want to thank you for your flexibility and your candor in throwing these things around. Sorry we went over to you and to our audience. Big round of applause for our panel. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much.